Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Right, almost 7,000 Islamophobic tweets were sent in English every day last month. Compare that to April, when it was an average of around 2,500 a day. July saw the most anti-Islamic abuse on Twitter for 5 months, as Europe was hit by the Nice terror attack and the murder of a priest. The data has been collected by a think tank called Demos and seen exclusively by this programme. In Catherine Nye's film, which is 10 minutes long, there is some very strong racist language towards the end. We've included it as an illustration of the kind of abuse that's being posted online. If you've got children around or you think you might be offended, please do come back to us in 10 minutes. Here's the film.
Islamophobia on Twitter is on the rise, and sometimes that turns up offline too.
When you start muttering Sharia law, this and that, Alibaba Park, that's the issue. So if you've got something to say, then you can say it.
There are these really significant increases in anti-Islamic activity. Now,
researchers at the think tank Demos have been looking at Islamophobia on Twitter for 5 months and have given us exclusive access to the data.
we've been seeing 5,000 tweets every single day which are anti-Islamic, seriously derogatory and hateful, being sent in the English language across the world. And it's been building month on month since May, so July was the worst so far, with just under 7,000 tweets judged as anti-Islamic every single day. And all of that amounts over those 5 months to over 200,000 tweets in total.
That was in the wake of terror attacks across France. The fear is how much an attack here could worsen the situation in the UK. East London Mosque. More than 7,000 people worship here every Friday. It's a massive landmark and a target for abuse.
We've received a lot of hateful messages from this user account here called Islam, the Evil Truth.
And what's he saying? Or she?
Muslims, attack and kill people. Muslims lie. Muslims can't be friends with others who are non-Muslims. Quite graphic and gruesome, like this one.
That's someone being beheaded.
Yeah, so that's a picture of someone beheading someone and someone's carrying a decapitated head. Sometimes it's really abusive content which kind of leaves a scar in your mind. Sometimes I look at it from the point of view of my baby son who's going to be growing up in this kind of environment, and what kind of abuse is he likely to face as a result of his faith.
Rokeya Harris is 23. She's a student who lives locally and comes to the mosque. In between her studies, she's a published writer, and she uses Twitter a lot.
So this says time to go, time to pack, it's time guys, you've had a good run, you need to leave, you've had enough time here, you're not integrated enough, you're threatening our way of life.
And do you get more messages like this when there's an incident like the Nice attack?
Yeah, absolutely, always. It doesn't really matter what I say or what I'm writing about or what I'm posting about. The responses after some kind of terrorist attack will always be slating Islam in some kind of way, or insulting Islam, or insulting me, or insulting my hijab, even if I'm talking about something completely unrelated, even if I'm sending condolences to the victims.
Quite a significant spike
The Demos research shows there are large peaks in Islamophobic tweets around terror attacks. 20,000 tweets a day during the Nice attacks.
In the immediate wake of Nice, it's 20,000.
In July, the most Islamophobic month recorded so far, this was significant.
So each of these red dots is an anti-Islamic tweet coming from the UK. And that we can see happening right now, that's a digital reaction to the Nice attacks.
A massive red mass.
That's right, angry, abusive, anti-Islamic, all happening in the immediate aftermath of Nice.
This is not surprising though, is it? That people are angry after a terrorist attack and are taking to Twitter to vent it.
It's not surprising, no. I mean, people are angry in the wake of terrorist attacks, but that's what also makes terrorist attacks very dangerous. The Islamophobic tweets that we're measuring here, these are not people that are being angry at the terrorists. It's not people that are being angry at Islamic State. It's people that are being angry at the wider Muslim world. It's people that are blaming Muslims for the terrorist attacks. These are the things which are Islamophobic, and surprising or not, they are damaging, whether they're happening on the street or if they're happening on social media.
Obama is a damn raghead explains a lot. Sorry to hear about France, these Muzzies just don't quit.
So what do we do about it?
Well, it's very difficult. It's important to say, actually, only a thin sliver of this is actually illegal. Only when there's an actual threat to life are people actually breaking the law. All the rest of this is actually sub-criminality, and therefore the people that are in the online space actually are far less protected than the offline space when it comes to receiving that kind of abuse.
Do you think Muslims are doing enough to separate themselves from atrocities like what happened in Nice?
Yes, I absolutely do think that Muslims are doing a lot to condemn these kind of attacks and disassociate themselves. I mean, community leaders are constantly coming out to condemn these kind of attacks. At Friday prayers, you know, the Imam will often condemn attacks that really have nothing to do with them. And it's come to the point now where I don't really think that me condemning these kind of attacks are going to change people's opinions.
While I'm interviewing Ruqayya, a man behind us starts interrupting. I ask him if he can keep his voice down. He replies saying it's free speech, and then he adds, "There's no Sharia law here."
It's freedom of expression, but you've obviously chosen to sit here right now. So if you've got something to say, then you can say it. Do you want to talk about Sharia law? You want to talk about Sharia law to me? We'll talk about Sharia law. You obviously said it for a reason.
I wasn't talking to you.
Yeah, who were you talking to? Who are you talking to about Sharia law here, sir?
We're losing our right to freedom of expression. And I think...
Why is that?
Because we are. We're being told to be politically correct when we don't want to be politically correct.
Okay, listen, political correctness is one thing. I understand that you feel that you want to have a right to say certain things. I understand that, but we don't want Sharia law.
Conjecture, whatever.
Yeah, but I'm telling you as a Muslim that is not something. I'm telling you as a Muslim that isn't something that I want.
The way I see Islam, again, I don't know too much about Islam, but to me, I see it as an ideology as opposed to a religion. I don't see it as a religion. I see it as an ideology.
I know, but that is you, sir, and that is a result of the things that you see happening around the world. I understand when you see the things happening around the world, you think that it is an ideology.
I'm not stereotyping you. I don't wish for you to stereotype me.
So, in a strange twist, our conversation about Islamophobia just got interrupted by some Islamophobia. What do you think of what you had to say?
You know, it does make me a bit sad that it's this normalised now, that it's almost like I cannot, sit in a park with you and have a conversation without some kind of Islamophobe wanting to get a word in. But as the conversation went on, as I engaged with him, which I do think sometimes it is worth doing because you don't know where these people have formed their opinions from. And I think that people really struggle to differentiate between everything they read and see on the news and things that they see happening around the world, how they kind of disassociate that with everyday Muslims that they see.
I've been called a Paki most of my life. I'm pretty used to that. Things have been getting worse. People calling me a sand nigger, still calling me a Paki, so that hasn't really stopped. A jihadi sympathizer telling me to back home from whatever Islamic hole that I crawled out of, which was Norway. Also, someone else called me an undercover jihadi. I think people are just saying it now. I think we're hearing about it more now. But I have to be honest, I think the feelings have been there for quite a while. I don't actually want to say, ooh, Islamophobes, just bad, because I think the rest of us have a responsibility as well. Muslim, non-Muslim, we're obviously not having the conversations that need to be had for people to feel safe enough that they can have real conversations and get beyond the name-calling.
Dia Khan is a documentary filmmaker who set up a magazine called Sisterhood to showcase female Muslim writers.
Every time a terrorist attack happens, we don't need to get a bland press release. from the mosque around the corner saying we condemn it. That's not the impression I get that what people want to see. I think what people don't know in the UK and in the West is that the first targets of extremists are other Muslims. Muslims have been dying and suffering at the hands of these barbaric groups for decades, and nobody cared because the victims look like me. Now people care because the victim looks like you. Many of us have faced, and many of our colleagues have faced, persecution, violence, imprisonments because they've taken on extremists. But that's not the story that you're often told.
Dia says shutting down abuse is not the answer.
Look, I don't like racist Islamophobes, I don't like sexist pigs, I don't like lots of people, but just shutting them down isn't going to resolve this. The feelings don't disappear. The fact of the matter is, the UK is never going to be white again. It's just not going to happen. People can wish it, but it's not realistic. Similarly, our parents who have left Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Muslim countries, for them to think that they can re-establish those countries and the lives that they had there over here, it's not going to happen. And I recognize the fact that that's a big loss for both people, for both sides. But the reality is that we have to move forward. The reality is that we're together going to have to find out, what does it mean to be British moving forward? What does it mean to build a society that includes all of us, where it means looking like me and looking like you?
Let's talk now to Carl Miller from the think tank who carried out the research, Demos. Also, Ruqayyah Harris is here. You saw her in the film. And Ajmal Masroor, an imam and broadcaster. Welcome, all of you. How do you identify Islamophobic tweets, first of all?
So this is social media research, and obviously we have to cope with enormous volumes of tweets. So we build big structures of algorithms that we train with, it's artificial intelligence, to really try and make a distinction between those that are using slur terms in ways which are not derogatory and those that are. So that cuts down 34 million tweets into the numbers that we saw on your report just now. And
what do you think of the data that you've collected in terms of the month of July?
I think it shows that underneath all the amazing and brilliant things that we're so used to seeing on Twitter and the other social media platforms, there is actually quite a problematic and worrying kind of underlayer of hate and Islamophobic hate. And this is really something that we as a society have to confront, I think, in lots of different ways.
Is it a worldwide problem?
Yes, it is a worldwide problem, so this is not just coming from the UK. The numbers are for the English language, and it's happening in lots of other languages too. So this is by no means a journey which the UK is going on alone.
Okay. Ruqayyah, we saw a little bit of the kind of experiences that you have to undergo pretty regularly, actually, in your life. Tell our audience a little bit more about what that is like.
I mean, it's weird. I wouldn't say it happens every day, you know, very often, but online definitely it's becomes something that's quite normal to me to receive that kind of abuse. And it's weird. I mean, I feel on the one hand quite hardened to it because it is so normal and it's something that I feel like I've sort of grown up hearing. But at the same time, it never stops sort of being something that plays on your mind and angering you and irritating you and stuff like that.
Does it wear you down?
It can do, but I've learnt to kind of accept on some level that it's going to happen. You know, there's nothing I can do about that. I can't stop that. You know, the minute that people see a woman wearing hijab, there's going to be some kind of reaction. It doesn't matter what I say. It's not the content of what I say that's the problem. It's just me as a Muslim. So,
and what do you think of this conflation in some people's minds of Islamist terrorists and ordinary Muslim people going about their lives every day in Britain?
I mean, I think it is, you know, it's a shame that people conflate the two, and I think it's really a situation where people don't engage that much with Muslims in their community, and perhaps Muslims don't engage with them. But I think that the problem comes from that, the fact that they cannot differentiate between, you know, the terrorists they see on television that actually have nothing to do with ordinary Muslim people, but it's just about how they're going to sort of engage and overcome those kind of prejudices.
Ajmal, as an imam, I wonder if you hear a lot people saying, well, you should be out on the streets condemning attacks from IS and other Islamist terrorists.
I've been condemning until I'm blue on my face, and people still continue to associate and connect Islam with terrorism. You've just done it by calling it Islamist terrorist. Why give them that credence? Why give them that accolade? Islam is
How would you describe them then?
Terrorist, criminals, thugs, mugs, name them all sorts. Just don't give them the honor of Islam. Islam is a religion followed by 1.8 billion people of the world. None of them support these idiots, so we need to make that differentiation. And I'm very sad to hear Ruqayyah's experience, that she feels it's normal when our children, our generation, and Muslims and non-Muslims in this country think Islamophobia, bigotry, prejudice and discrimination is normal. We are heading for a big disaster. And finally, I believe it's become fashionable.
Sorry, hang on, we're heading for a big disaster. What do you mean?
I'm just about to say.
Oh, right.
In our pub banter, in our restaurant, in our conversations, in our social setting, it's become sexy and fashionable to deride a Muslim, talk against Islam. That's the disaster we're talking about. Our children are feeling the fear. My nephew said to me, "Uncle, I don't want to be a Muslim anymore." He's only 10. When our prejudice and phobia cascades down to school playground, we have failed. We have failed miserably, and that's what we need to challenge. I get it every day. Tweet after appearing on television. There are media pundits, in quote unquote, media personalities who speak freely and candidly without any shame, calling us all sorts of names, making Islamophobic and derogatory remarks. There is no accountability, and this is a very bad day for all of us. And I'm glad Demos has done this research just to show glaringly obvious elephant in the room. No more Islamophobia, please stop it. Because in previous generations when this happened, I'm afraid what we saw in Europe was bloodbath, and we don't want to see that ever again. Not in our lifetime, and not in the lifetimes of our children or anyone in the future. It's very frightening.
Yes. Is there an element of the EU referendum vote, do you think, that we should talk about in relation to the data or not?
Yes, there is. I mean, the first large spike that we actually saw was in the immediate wake of Brexit, and that, in a sense, I think, kind of began to legitimise the airing of certain views that, up until that moment, even online, some people felt actually they couldn't talk about. So we began to realise actually that a lot of the views that we actually thought had been confronted and indeed defeated were actually just pushed out of the public space. And in a sense, I think the Brexit vote, like in the immediate aftermath of terrorist attacks, kind of opens up that public space again for those kind of views to be aired. So Islamophobia, at least online, is incredibly event specific. It's not constant. It really explodes after things like terrorist attacks, when people are angry, people are scared. I mean, of course, a really worrying, really problematic thing here, and we can see this actually in the Twitter response to this very programme, is that there is no distinction in many people's minds between a legitimate criticism of Islam and Islamophobia. They regard the condemnation of Islamophobia to be the shutting down of legitimate criticism of Islam, and they think that anything they say that is Islamophobic is a legitimate criticism. Now this is wrong, and the only thing that this plays into, this Islamophobia, is the narratives that Islamic State wish British Muslims to hear. You know, none of this makes us any safer. None of this makes terrorist attacks less likely to happen, this Islamophobia. All it does is play into that narrative. And that is what is really worrying in the wake of these attacks.
So we have hate crime legislation. Is that enough? Do we need something else? What else? What is, you say please stop. That's not going to work.
It's not enough. We need to have more robust legislation. We need to have...
but I mean, what can be more robust than hate crime legislation?
Let me give you a three-step solution. We need to start from schools. We need to we need to educate our children that racism is not right. We said that. We taught that. I was taught that when I was younger. Anti-Semitism is wrong.
Sorry, I'm just going to pause on each point that you made. So, and please join in this conversation. Even if there was a period in the curriculum where a teacher has that kind of conversation, actually, if you're a racist child, it's because you've got racist parents.
But we're going to change that,
And it almost doesn't matter what the teacher says.
We're going to change that. Do you know why? Because generation would change. When I was younger, I had bottles broken on my face because I'm black or brown by white, supremacist, BNP thugs. It doesn't happen anymore, not on the basis of race. We change that by fighting back, by educating our children. So start by educating our children.
Well, secondly, I think on the education point, I don't know what you think here, but I think that kind of the really important thing, at least online, is education around digital citizenship.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, you know, there's clearly Islamophobia is a problem online and offline too, but online we really do lack the basic norms to actually treat one another civilly. So whilst we do...
The etiquette.
Yes, basic responsibility.
I call them the keyboard warriors.
Okay.
Faceless, nameless, you can do what you like. That's not acceptable because it's hurting people, it's destroying. One point you made earlier on, Carl, which is about criticism of Islam, is absolutely open. Even God says in the Quran, if you want to criticize God and the Quran, go ahead. It's not the same thing. You can be critical, but you don't have to ridicule people for that. And that's where I draw the line, and that needs to be said loudly and clearly. And last point is about the politicians. Many politicians pander to the right-wing fascist votes in order to get their popularity up. Shame on them. They need to stand on their ground and say no. No Islamophobia will be tolerated, even if we lose votes. We don't care. So we need to get rid of this narrative, challenge the thuggery, challenge the education and lack of it, and of course media and politicians need to be responsible for it.
Ruqayyah, what do you think?
I mean, I think that the biggest issue here is how socially acceptable it is, and I think that it's not necessarily something that can be changed by legislation. If anything, it makes sort of Islamophobes feel like, well, we're really marginalised now, and we're the ones that are the victims because we can't speak our mind, and you know, our freedom of speech has been, you know, sort of ruined. But the real issue here is how socially acceptable it is, and as you said, it's the fact that these politicians are coming out, they're making, you know, insinuating very Islamophobic things, they're stereotyping us, they're making sweeping generalizations of us. So it's these kinds of problems that are
it's asking people to really take care in their language.
To take care and be accountable, take responsibility and be accountable
and be specific.
Be specific.
Here's a challenge for BBC and all the other channels. Stop using the term Islamic and Islamist before describing a terrorist. Call them a criminal. Call them any other names. If you can do that, we've begun the fight and we will win that fight together.
Why will that help?
Because it becomes a subliminal messaging in the minds of people. The moment Islam is mentioned, they think about terrorism. I've done this in playgrounds, in schools, when I do workshops. I've asked kids, what do you think about when you think about Islam? The first thing they say is terrorism. When that little boy wrote terrorist house, and by mistake he wrote terrorist house, we call that subliminal messaging that has embedded in itself in his head. So we need to get rid of that. We need to get rid of that narrative. It's nothing to do with Islam. In fact, terrorism has no religion and extremism has no religion. We need to call them extremists, terrorists, and don't give them the description of Islam in front.
Okay. Right, Chris says, what a revealing interview in the park, which was interrupted by the face of modern Britain. How ignorant. Peter says, how can you reason with such bigots? I mean, that is a decent question, you know.
Yeah.
You know, the view is set. They are entrenched, as you say. You know, when you talk about telling them it's unacceptable, they believe that is some kind of censorship.
That's the thing. I do think it's important sometimes to engage with these people, but at the same time, I think you have to pick your battles, and you know, to expect every Muslim to go about your life, you know, every single day and prepare to engage with Islamophobes is just unfair, because you know, what person has to engage with bigots or racists on a daily basis, and you know, is it really our duty to educate people? But at the same time, I think that it is important in certain situations.
Okay.
And online too, I think, you know, I mean, it's important to say, you know, there are 500 million tweets being sent every day. So the numbers that even very large and very worrying are actually a very small kernel. And even there, I think we're going to have to come to terms with the fact that public life has changed, and people can jump into public life now over, you know, just with the use of a smartphone. You know, we are going to rub up against this content. It is going to be out there and it is going to be visible. And there is nothing that we can do about it. You know, in the time it takes Twitter or Facebook or the police or anyone to remove a piece of content, to judge it and judge it against content policy and take it down, you know, you can send 10 tweets. That's the logic of social media.
Let me read some comments from people who have a different point of view. Emily on Facebook. I think the man in the film was right, the man that was talking to you and that you had a conversation with about Sharia law, although he went about it in the wrong way. As a country, we are losing our right to freedom of speech, but there is a way to go about it without being racist. People confusing being a respectful Muslim and being a terrorist.
I bet you any money that person doesn't know what Sharia means, has never done a single reading about Islam, and is regurgitating what they have read or heard on the media.
Let me read some more. This tweet from Nath. You just showed a clip of a woman confronting a man about Sharia law. This is Britain. What about British law? If you want to practice Sharia law, then do it in your own country, not here. I'm sure that's something you hear a lot.
It is something that I hear a lot, and it's interesting because, you know, I'm talking about Sharia law because this man has started this discussion. It's in no way that I went up to him and said, excuse me, sir, I'd really like to practice Sharia law here.
Yeah.
And what's your home country?
My home country is Britain. I was born here.
Josh on Facebook says, establish grooming gangs across the UK, kill and heckle British soldiers, promote anti-Semitism and homophobia, then claim you're the ones being persecuted. And this from David, an email, Muslim people make no effort to integrate, they choose to make themselves different. This is Great Britain, we don't want to change.
I find that incredible. With the relationship that we all go out of our way to build is what counts, and we are not doing enough of that. I believe Muslims and non-Muslims are not doing enough of that. So don't blame the Muslims for integration or lack of it. I just have to go to some areas of the UK where you won't see anything but one community, the monolith that we talk about. I believe in integration fully. I think Ruqayya does, and I'm sure all the guests that you have had, including Alex, right? No, sorry. Carl, sorry, got your name wrong. Carl believes we all do. But how do we integrate? Integration comes as a two-way process, by relationship, by trust, by interaction. I want to open my doors to my neighbors, Muslims and non-Muslims. I want to open my mosque doors for people to come and see. That's the trust building that we're missing at the moment. Honest conversation is missing. And that's how I believe more integration will happen. And that's how we will defeat Islamophobia.
Thank you all very much. Thank you very much. Carl Miller, his organisation did the research. Ruqayya Harris, thank you very much. And Ajmal Masroor, thank you.
Thank you.
I've been getting away with it all.